Welcome to Banyen Books, Branches of Wisdom, celebrating the joy of bright ideas and heartful lifelong learning. Branches of Wisdom is a series of intimate conversations with the world's most influential authors and visionaries. We explore spirituality and the human mind, ecology and culture. Most episodes are recorded with a live audience. You can join our live events and submit questions to your favorite guests. Check out our upcoming schedule at banyen.com. Since 1970, Banyen Books has been a rich oasis at the crossroads of wisdom and philosophy, offering resources for humanity's evolving paths. We're a locally owned, independent bookstore in the heart of Vancouver's Kitsilano neighborhood. Visit us in person or shop online at banyen.com. Please subscribe, follow, like, and leave your reviews for the podcast. And now, enjoy. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Branches of Wisdom, the Banyen Books podcast. I'm your host, Ross McKeachie, and I'm really excited about our guest this evening. She happens to be my teacher. I've been apprenticing with her for 9 years now, Yogacharini Maitreyi. Before we get to her formal introduction, acknowledging that although we have people joining us from all over the world for these live streaming events, the physical location of Banyen Books is on the traditional and unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Most of Banyen's podcast and event series are free. We welcome your donation to keep these programs accessible for all. Just click on the PayPal link in the show description below. Also, letting you know, towards the end of our conversation today, we will be taking questions from the live audience. So go ahead and type those into the comments field on YouTube, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. This evening's presentation is part 2 of an annual collaboration between Banyen Books and Archaea Foundation. We are here in celebration early of June 21st, which is the United Nations International Day of Yoga, as well as Canada's National Indigenous Peoples Day. Last week, we featured Maitreyi in discussion with Inuit elder, lawyer, and activist I.U. Peter as part of this series. And in this series, we always look at the relationship between India's Indigenous yogic and Tantric culture with the variety of Indigenous cultures on Turtle Island and around the world. We also examine ways to understand and heal the damaging impacts of our inherited colonial mindsets, traumas, and way of life. Archaea is a registered not-for-profit school based out of Canada and India. Archaea was founded by Yogacharini Maitreyi and is rooted in a full-spectrum, decolonized approach to traditional yoga and tantra, as well as the allied Indian arts and sciences. The school offers online programs to students worldwide and also holds in-person workshops, retreats, and corporate training. There's a weekly online community satsang every Saturday morning, an ongoing 500-hour in-depth teacher training, and many other online courses. If you'd like to join Maitreyi for a retreat at Hollyhock, June 14th to 19th, please check out our website, archaea.net. And the topic of that retreat is Finding Fulfillment Through Tantra. Magnetize your heart's desire. Yogacharini Maitreyi is an international master teacher, practical mystic, and founder of Archaea Foundation. She was born and raised in India, where she was immersed in the yogic life for over 4 decades through her grandfather and gurus. For over 26 years, she has been dedicated to sharing and teaching a full-spectrum, decolonized approach to yoga, mindfulness, traditional tantra, and expansive life principles. This includes seeing and shifting within ourselves deep-rooted conditioning that is divisive, exploitative, colonial, or disrespectful. Since 1997 in India, Maitreyi has been given formal titles like Yoga Chemal or Expert, Yoga Shiromani, Gem, and Yogacharini, Guide. In 2007, she was one of the youngest to be invited to the advisory board of the World Yoga Council in Europe. She has over 100 published articles and has trained over 60 corporations in enlightened leadership, stress, and self-management. She also runs a foundation in India for children living in slums. Maitreyi's School Archaya Foundation is dedicated to reviving the deeper dimensions of India's allied arts and sciences, which have been watered down by mainstream appropriation. And I'm really excited to get into the conversation with her today. Again, if you want to learn more about her work and programs, her website is archaya.net. Banyen community, join me in a warm welcome for my teacher, Yogacharini Maitreyi. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you for having me, Ross. Wonderful to be here.
So good to have you here. Thank you. I thought it would be nice if we maybe started with just a simple centering practice to reconnect with ourselves before we get into the conversation.
Absolutely. So you know the Jyoti Mudra, and we're going to do this particular practice called the Jyoti Mudra, where we're touching the tips of our fingers, and we're going to place the forearms on our thighs. So let's do that and keep our eyes closed. Now, this is also called the Hakini Mudra, but I like the term Jyoti, which is inner illumination. So keeping the eyes closed, let the focus be internal, inwards. To cultivate and develop ease and an inner radiance. How do we exude lightness? How do we exude vitality? The Jyoti Mudra enables this by allowing for the flow of prana through our system. Prana is life force. So if our life force is blocked, stagnant, then it breeds disease. Whereas when it flows like a river, when there's no stagnation, then there's vitality, ease, and sattva. Sattva is this capacity to be still and alive. It's a dynamic stillness. Now let's bring our awareness to our bodies and how we're sitting. Can we sit tall, chest open, shoulders relaxed? If your body is releasing with a sigh, then please use any sounds that allow the body to come back to safety. Like I said, Jyoti is inner illumination, and Mudra is a mystic or energetic seal. It seals energy in a particular pathway. So this moving and sealing of energy to establish a new pathway also has an impact on the neurological pathways. So Mudra does not just enable a new energetic pathway, but also a new thought pathway, a different way, a different perspective, a different paradigm, which is what we're going to discuss today. So let's stay with this mudra and bring our awareness to the sensations between the palms and fingers. Each of the fingers represents each of the elements called the Pancha Mahabhuta. Pancha 5, Maha great, Bhuta elements. Earth, water, fire, air, space. Now let's bring our awareness simply to how our breath is in the moment. Follow the breath as it moves into your nostrils, into your windpipe, into your lungs, and follow the breath out. A simple, natural awareness of our breathing in the moment. Now let's gently lengthen and deepen the breath. Let's breathe in, expanding, pushing open the diaphragm, the intercostal muscles that hold the ribs together. Expand front, side, and back of your rib cage, and release with the lips pouted. Let's breathe in through the nose, expanding as much as possible, the entire rib cage, feeling the elasticity. In the beginning, of course, you might feel tightness rather than the elasticity due to not being used to this breath. And release through the mouth, lips pouted. Third and last time, breathe in through the nose. Nice deep, 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 deep breath. And just when you feel I'm really full, take another sip through the nose and release. Beautiful. And come back to your point of stillness or ease, safety in the body, in the breath, being aware of the mudra. And for those of you who are sensitized, after just 3 rounds of this great yogic breath, you might find some sensitization to prana between the palms and fingers. And this is the rootedness and sensitization that we want to develop on a yogic or tantric path. This capacity to feel deeply. Now let's visualize the Shiva Stambham, Shiva consciousness, Shiva auspiciousness, Shiva change for the better. Stambham, a pillar. So we're visualizing a pillar of light that moves through us, around us. It's going through to Mother Earth into infinity at the bottom, and on top into Father Sky into infinity. And we're part of this infinite glowing stream of consciousness, where everything that doesn't serve us dissolves in the Shiva Stambham. Let's take 3 deep breaths to anchor in all that we did and the Shiva Stambham. Breathe in. Great yogic breath, expanding diaphragm, lower chest, mid chest, upper chest, going all the way up and releasing. Breathing in, expanding, expanding. Just when we feel we're full, take another sip in through the nose and release. One last time, breathe in. Deep, deep, deep breath. Some of you may not have this lung capacity, so you can release your breath sooner. Those of you who feel I can expand more, take another sip in and another sip in and release through the mouth, lips pouted. Sukha, Bastrika, Sukham, comfortable. Bastrika, bellows. It's a comfortable cleansing breath. Now we'll take a moment just to reintegrate all the dimensions of our existence. The physical body, how are we holding our shoulders, back, neck? How is the mudra, which is connecting, awakening all the elements, which are our original building blocks, so the original ancestors. So if we have any ancestral trauma, this is a wonderful practice to release or drop or dissolve any imbalances that were passed on along the way, because we're going right to the root. Let's be aware of our breathing, the energy between the palms, and the energy that's flowing in our body. And around our body, if you're sensitive to that. And visualizing the Shiva Stambham, holding all these dimensions, or being aware of all these dimensions. And we'll take just a moment in silence, knowing that we're not just the physical body, but have all these elements or dimensions available to us. Om Shanti 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 Om. Gently rub your palms, place them on your eyes, soothing the eyes, turning the eyes inwards so that we may cultivate inner sight or insight. And gently relax your palms and welcome back. Thanks, Ross, again for that suggestion. It's a good way to start where everybody's calm and relaxed and receptive.
Thank you for that, Maitreyi. So I want to start by asking you, as someone who's born and raised in India and to whom the Tantric and yogic culture is indigenous, why is it important to you to reclaim Tantra and to work at decolonizing yoga and other spiritual practices?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ross, because in India itself, it's not even before I started traveling to the West. In India itself, I wanted to reclaim Tantra because thanks to Bollywood, I don't know if you've seen how a Tantric is represented in Indian cinema. So if growing up in India, in any Indian cinema, if you see, there'll be this guy wearing black and he's wearing a garland of skulls and he's like, Hom, Shreem, like, he throws something into the fire and it's black tantra, right? Like they're talking about black magic and this guy is casting a spell on someone. He's like almost witchy and, really scary looking. So those are the images of tantrics that I grew up with in mainstream cinema. Of course, it's a minor segment of tantrics who've gone rogue. It's not a real tantric. But for me, I was like, so when I studied Tantra from my grandfather, I understood it more deeply and then went and studied with my guru. It's nothing to do. There's, My guru is the most simple woman. Like, she'll be walking on the streets of Pondicherry in a sari. So she looks nothing like that. And yet, this is the image of who a tantric is in India. Then fast forward, I travel in my 20s to the West to teach Tantra. And here it's hypersexualized. So here the image of Tantra is, all these women swaying to the moonlight and, looking, Tantrika, and looking, sensual, and which again has no relevance to how you would study it in an ashram in a traditional setting. So I saw the image of Tantra was so corrupted. At least in India, it was in the Bollywood films, and the teachings were still very strong and very rooted. So if you went to a teacher, you still got the real teachings. Whereas here in the West, not only is it corrupted in all the, Netflix programs, but it's also corrupted in the actual passing on of the tradition, which to me was like, oh my God, this is horrific, because there's nothing left of it here, which is got a remnant of its essence. So yes, so seeing these two mainstream ideas that were being propagated, I thought it was very, very important to reclaim something that, is very dear to my heart, because my teacher herself, she never took many students. I was one of 4 students. So it's not something that a regular Indian person goes and studies. They are more interested in studying, becoming a doctor or a lawyer. If you see a lot of Indian stand-up comedians, they'll tell you how every Asian parent wants their child to succeed well in school. That is their goal for their child, not to go study yoga or be part of an ashram and give up, this material life. There's a lot of material striving in the minds of Indian parents. So the spirituality, we take it for granted because we've had it for centuries, right? So from both perspectives, I thought it was very, very necessary to reclaim Tantra. And also because of what was happening to me when I was traveling in the West and teaching Tantra in the first few years, I didn't use the word Tantra. I used yoga, because I said, oh, people come to me with confused ideas or expectations, which means I'm going to be teaching some partner work or something else, when I'm actually going to be working on, I can talk about the meaning of Tantra later, but talking or teaching about being with self. So there's a lot of self-awareness work in Tantra, which is missed out, and that foundation is not laid. So that's another reason where I wanted to reclaim it as well. Oh, I can't hear you, Ross, for some reason.
I had my mic muted.
Yeah.
Why should non-Indian people care about this, do you think? If I have no connection to the tradition and I just want to go have a nice, sexy time, why should I care?
Okay, if I'm being an Indian auntie, I'll say, because it'll mess you up, just one word. You want to get messed up, go do that stuff. And if you don't want to be messed up, then you really have to care about this, because if you take these sciences and practices flippantly, your physical, emotional, mental, energetic body is going to be so way off the balance of Prakriti. And I've seen a few people come to me doing these practices in a wrong way, or getting engaged in a wrong connection too soon, too fast. And yeah, it is because of this Tantra that's floating around. So they should care, because it will mess them up otherwise. Yeah. That's a short answer.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm sure we're going to explore more of the nuances as we progress along here. Also, a reminder to the live audience, we'll be getting to some of your questions in the last segment, so go ahead and keep typing those in the YouTube comments. Okay, this question, it's a little bit of a rambling lead into the question, so bear with me, because I wanted to try and give the context. So my question is, with all of the abuses being exposed in yoga and tantra lineages, and all of the cultural appropriation of these traditions, I know many people are confused about what to believe. Many people want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and reject these traditions completely based on the distorted versions of them that they've experienced. Or people want to claim that yoga or tantra is whatever they want it to be personally, and that no one can tell them what their yoga is, what their Tantra is. So how do you think we can try and disentangle all of this and respect the actual yoga or Tantra tradition while also giving ourselves room to breathe and explore and find our own connection to it?
Once again, brilliant question, but there are two parts to it. You were saying one is people throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, I'm not going to touch this thing anymore. It's hurt me. And so what if the person who hurt me is imbalanced? It's not the science itself. They don't have the discernment to see that the science is separate from the scientist. I mean, not a good scientist, obviously, somebody who, mixed two chemicals that just burst and, the explosion happened to be on this poor student. And therefore, because of them carrying the trauma of that emotional or physical, I've known teachers who are physically abusive as well, or sexual explosion or abuse, they have, kind of said, oh, all of Tantra and yoga is something not for me. Or the second part that you addressed is that they take what they want, which matches their imbalance. I've seen a lot of that. So they put on their projections of what yoga or Tantra should be, because it's like a kid wanting cotton candy. I've seen that many, many times in the Tantra world. It's like, saying, oh, Tantra should be, or one of the foundations of Tantra is to learn to savor everything you do, which is savoring your body. Like even in asana, that's why you're slowing down. It's not a very left brain, patriarchal, hard, I'm just gonna, and it's not within the framework of the exercise paradigm where no pain, no gain. That's not Tantra at all. Tantra is allowing for flow, still being connected to your body's lusciousness and practicing, even on a physical level, savoring and enjoying the practice. But of course, when people take that to an extreme, they want enjoyment in everything. And so, you can't feed your kid cotton candy all day. You cannot. But that's what is happening. Like you rightly said, when somebody's imbalance gets projected onto the science. So there are a lot of pitfalls to both the approaches, in a nutshell, again.
Right. Okay. So let's say I potentially have one of these imbalances. How do I notice it? How do I take note of it and try and move beyond it, or find a teacher or a community that isn't kind of playing into that?
That's a very good question. In India, we say when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So it's also our discernment, our karmas. It's not like I didn't have a choice of different teachers. Most of them in India during my time were the well publicized ones. There were big hoardings of these teachers, out there. And unfortunately, that's being translated nowadays, I would say, with internet explosion. There's no hoardings. When I grew up, the internet was not big. So it was like you find big placards of these teachers saying, oh, he's coming to give a talk and he'll have this huge ashram. And there was all this glitz and glamour, which is no different from a pop star, or a rock star or a sports star. So a lot of people were drawn to that. And then you'll find the scandal come out of that later. And my own mother was really, really scared when I said I wanted to go and learn these sciences, even though her father was a Vedic scholar. She said, oh, there's so much going on these days. What if the organization swallows you up and I lose you? So a lot of her trauma and her fears of what she was hearing about all these teachers in India, I'm not even talking about the West, in India, scared her. So I had to be really discerning. I had to do my practice. I invoked all my ancestors and said, take me to the right place. So one, I would say, is connecting to a grander dimension. And when your heart is really, really sincere. And two, I wanted to study with a female teacher. So before that, I studied in the Shivananda ashram, which was more a yogic and Vedantic tradition. But the Tantric tradition, because of all these fears around, I was like, I'll be more comfortable with a female teacher. And somebody, I just said, this is my heart's longing. And the second person, like a friend's friend, kind of said, hey, I heard you were looking for this and I've heard of this small place, would you go check it out? I don't even know the name of the place. So that's how I found my teacher. Now, of course, thanks to the internet, there are lesser known teachers, but at least they're available on the internet. Maybe they're not big, they don't have like 30,000 or even 5,000 Instagram followers. And so I would say don't look or gauge the teacher according to how popular they are. That's one thing I find a lot of people don't have enough discernment to see that, just because somebody's big doesn't mean they're good, or their intentionality or their alignment is right. The second thing is, I would say, do already have some degree of rootedness and grounding and connection to the higher, and let your heart's desire come from a pure place and say, I really want to work on myself and purify. And when you ask, that will happen 100%. I've seen that in my life.
I just want to hone in on the word purify, because I know these days there can be a charge sometimes for people around that word. Can you just clarify what you mean by that?
Thank you. So by purify, I mean refine to a certain degree one's lifestyle, one's thinking habits, and one's emotional way of being. So when I say refine, I mean not overindulgence. So yes, we are savoring, but there's also no hedonism, or we're not like, oh, excess. So there has to be a certain degree of discipline as well, and healing of one's need for grabbing attention or grabbing nourishment. So being to some degree self-sufficient. And for that degree of self-sufficiency to come, there has to be a certain degree of refinement on a thought level also that's cultivated. So of course I can go deep into it, but the basic idea in the West is, it's like you going on a detox. You're taking responsibility for yourself and saying, yeah, I love food. I'm a gourmet, but I also want to get my gut health back in order. So I'm going to go on a little detox. Maybe I do a 16-hour intermittent fasting. So that can be looked at as purification as well. The capacity to refine and step back from sensory engagement.
What if I've got a lot of trauma and I'm really, really desperate for help? Because that puts me in a vulnerable position, doesn't it, when I'm looking for that help? How can I try and navigate that?
Absolutely, absolutely, Ross. I see that many, many times when people are there, when people are at their most vulnerable, that's when it's easier for, I would say, fake gurus to hook in faster, because of that desperation and because of that need, and because we're long looking for something like an instant, succor, an instant solution. And I have a lot of empathy for that. So finding somebody who's compassionate and who has a grounded, rooted way of being, even if it's just a Western counselor, I'd rather go and do that. I also do one-on-one healing sessions, but sometimes I've referred people to counselors if either I'm not available, my availability is less. I would tell them that that is way more valuable for them, rather than trying to seek out this instant magic. So to deal and work through the trauma, not just on an intellectual level, but also on a somatic and energetic level, is very important. So step 2 is when you have somebody to sound things off, you have an empathetic person who really wishes you well. I think that's really important, not to have somebody who's just like here, a counselor or a therapist who's here, but who's an integrative therapist. Second is to have a lot of practices. So the community classes that I teach, they don't require, which happen every Saturday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., don't require that people become my disciple or student or long-term practitioner. They can just take those tools and use them for trauma release. So in the beginning, I would say don't jump and commit to something that is too intensive, because the nervous system is already fried. So the first step would be to find something simple, gentle, safe, in the form of a therapist and in the form of certain practices, which are very light. They should not be like your hot yoga or, vinyasa or anything that is extremely demanding on the physical or the nervous system. So if people have these two things that they keep at the back of their minds while making their choice, I think they can slowly build strength, slowly release the trauma, and then things will become much clearer to them. The problem is when they have this magical thinking. Here they got out of this really dark place, and now this magical thinking is like, oh, in 2 minutes, I'm going to be like, this peacock feather over my head and everything's going to go, and I want to find this magical guru. That's where the, opening for somebody to take advantage of them is much more when people have magical thinking.
Thank you. I wonder if you can tell us, so Tantra comes from the indigenous culture of India. It has many schools and streams. I'm wondering if you can just explain a little bit some of the defining principles of the Tantric tradition as a whole.
So let's look at the basics. So if you look at the word tan itself, tan means body. And any Hindi-speaking person will tell you, that tan is body, man is mind. So we have tantra and mantra. So mantra is the mind and tra is tool. So a tool to transcend the limitations of the mind. So why we chant mantra is because the mind is like this, and we want to create a mind that is more expansive and more connected to the highest. Now, we want to do the same in Tantra. We want to work with the body, and we want to find that same lightness. We want to find that same expansiveness. We want to find that same joy in the physical reality, despite having that sensitivity. And I've spoken to quite a few people who are sensitive or sensitized, and sometimes that can lead to suffering because all these things that are happening around them, they're bombarded by it more and they feel things more intensely. But I reassure them that saying at least the first step is good, because in Tantra, we need this sensitivity. So we have an intensity of experience. Now, the issue is having also this healthy boundary where we don't feel bombarded, neither are we suffering. So in the body, in your tan, how do you be sensitized, and how do you also find that joy of expansion, which is what, again, another root of Tantra is, which is tanoti and trayati. So the expansion in the body, and trayati is liberation. So you're expanding and there is liberation. So expansion, not just on a mind level, on a thought level, on a paradigm level, but on the physical living and being level. And that is invaluable, that science that enables that. So that's in a gist. And so we're looking at the dance of Shiva and Shakti in our system. So if you look at Shiva, and that is why the iconography, so if somebody was not into the iconography, they'd go into this very intellectual definition. But if you love the iconography and the symbolism, it's lovely to see Shiva dance and Shakti dance. So there's a beautiful story of how when Shiva takes one step, Shakti takes a step with him. And these are beautiful stories. I grew up to say that the Shiva and Shakti in me have to dance in tandem with each other. So Shiva is consciousness. Shakti, as the name indicates, Shakti is energy. So there are a lot of advertisements in India where growing up, they'll say, oh, Shaktiman, which means if you drink Bonvita or some, silly drink, you're going to have so much Shakti that you're going to explode and you're going to, like be able to fly and be able to run fast and all of that. So Shakti itself means power. So you have this masculine consciousness principle, you have the feminine power principle or Shakti principle. And what does it take for both of these principles to dance in tandem with each other? You may ask, why can they not dance with each other? If Shiva goes faster and Shakti is left behind, then we can be a very good human being. We have all these great ideas, but we're not able to manifest and live it out. We might be sick, we might have autoimmune diseases, we might just feel, like we're not exerting the good we want to do in the world. We're not able to manifest or magnetize the good we want to do. Whereas, let's say their Shakti overtakes and Shiva, I mean, typically both of them will be in tandem, but I'm just giving a rough example. Shakti, kind of goes far ahead. Then imagine what somebody with too much power but no consciousness is. They would, terrorize using their money power or power of position, and they're living without consciousness. So we need a nice balance of this in the tantric life. So it brings to our awareness, is the Shakti and Shiva in me dancing in tandem? So that's the premise. Then there are many streams, or there are many margas, we say, which are the different paths depending on the teacher and the tradition you choose. So there's slight variations in the way the teacher will teach, or, depending on the marga you choose. So there are all these principles, understanding what Tantra is, this dance of Shiva and Shakti, all the practices and principles to get sensitized to prana Shakti, prana or Shakti, life force energy, becoming conscious of all areas of your life, right from what you drink to what you think, all the unconscious shadows. So when you say Shiva and Shakti, there's so many layers of Shiva, so many layers of Shakti that we have to become aware of in our own system if we want this dance to continue in a good way. And then depending on the teacher you study with, what are the margas? So this is, again, what Tantra is in a nutshell.
Thanks. A reminder again to the live audience, we're going to get to some of your questions shortly. I wanted to touch on the impact, the ongoing impact of colonization in India on these traditions. I'm curious what you see as the lasting impacts of colonization in India itself on these traditions, and how that maybe if we can connect it to how it's migrated to the West as well.
So I would say one big impact, at least when I was growing up, is nobody wanted to study Tantra or yoga. Now it's different. It's come one full circle from the West. It's become hip. So when I was growing up, there were no yoga studios in, even though I was in a big city called Chennai, which is South India, called Madras earlier. There was not a single yoga studio when I was growing up. Suddenly it goes to the West, it comes back, and then this founder of that studio has gone to the West. He's like, oh, there's yin yoga, there's this yoga, there's that yoga. And he brings back the Western yoga, and it explodes in India, in the urban environment I'm talking about. So that is the effect of colonization. We haven't gone and, valued what is already there, which is a holistic practice, which has yin in it, which has vinyasa in it, which has, all the other elements, asana, jati, kriya. So in a typical yoga class, you would find all these elements coming together. Depending on the age group, depending on the need of the person, it would vary. So let's say it's a group that's recovering, so it would be more restorative by having slower postures and slower movements. If it's a young, kind of group which is into sport and needs a little bit more, maybe there'll be a little bit more vinyasa. So the teacher would see the person they're teaching to and have that kind of awareness as to what to teach. Whereas now, like I said, it's all, compartmentalized as though they're separate forms, which they're not. So the effect of colonization is that the Western approach has come back to India in a big way. And a lot of the traditional teachers, my own teacher doesn't teach anymore, and there's a lot of other teachers which I've heard of, they're just not teaching because either it's not viable or they have too small groups and people don't hear about them. So that's what's happening, which is a sad part. Or there's this teacher who's a big speaker and he's good with drumming up 20,000 volunteers, and then he's known all over. So, or she's known all over. So that's, I would say the bigger, the better has become the motto, unfortunately. And that's what I see as a effect of colonization, not valuing the subtle. it's the sensationalism that gets, the attention, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, before we get to audience questions, there's just one follow-up to that. I think sometimes it's confusing for people to hear that what they were taught by someone from India was not really a traditional approach. I'm wondering if we can address the way that yoga and tantra have been appropriated by Indian people, megalomaniac type people like Yogi Bhajan, Patabi Joyce, Bikram, um, and brought to the West, and then people go, oh well, this guy's from India, and he makes it sound like this is the thing, this is how it is.
That's a very good question, and that's a question that will take a long answer. But in short, what has happened is the people who've migrated to the West have always been type A personalities. So I think the ones who created these big fan followings, or I would say student followings, have also been very type A in terms of coming from this paradigm of push, push, push. Now, let's take Bikram. I'm using Bikram because, his documentary is all over Netflix. And, it's pretty obvious. Like when people were asking me and I would say clips, I would say, yeah, I've judged kids who are in yoga competitions. You might seem, oh, that seems like an antithesis, yoga and competition. But yeah, that is a reality in India where we have these yoga competitions for kids. Again, these are poor village kids, and they're trying to motivate them and make them do something. So when I was really young, I judged them, but later on I didn't find any excitement in being invited as a judge. But for the time being, it was good. But it was not like these kids studied in an ashram and they were taught how to live yoga. They were taught just the asanas, and they were super bendy, super flexible kids, like gymnastic kids. Let's put it as that. And Bikram came from that culture. He was also a product of colonial oppression. And it was interesting. I met one of his students in Vancouver, and he narrated the story that Bikram, when he was a child, was walking on the sidewalk, and there was the car of one of the British guys, and it splashed slush on him. And the policeman, instead of asking if the child was okay, actually chased Bikram from there and say, hey, get out of here. So Bikram said, I am going to become famous one day and I'm going to drive a car like this. And he did that. Like his mind was pretty powerful. He came to US and, how many cars does he have? Like 50 cars, So long story short, if I go into that whole story, it gives you his psyche is all that I'm saying. That his psyche was there to say, hey, you can't put me down. I'm going to buy like many more cars than this. And that was his life goal. His life goal was not moksha, was not refinement, was not purification. It was to prove a point, which he did. But 20 years ago, when people asked me about the yoga or the style, I said, that's going to increase your pitta. It would make you lose weight. It would, in the beginning, give you a little bit of flexibility, but it can also hurt you because of this excessive pitta. Pitta is fire and water. So it's a really fiery practice, which is not for everybody, and where the incidence of injury is going to be really high. And his personality itself is a very megalomaniac personality. If you see him, in the Netflix documentary, thanks to all the old clips. But even before that, I knew it. But now it's out there in the open for everybody to see. That's the only difference. So when, like I said, my teacher used to speak to me about that. She used to tell me, oh, this person, because they've all met at conferences, and the same happened to me. I went to conferences, I was meeting all these people in person, and you just see through it. If you have a little bit of sattva, which is, stillness in your mind, you can just observe and see each person's personality or vasanas, predispositions. So it's not rocket science once you become discerning. And the key here is once you become discerning. Yeah.
Which is a constant process of refining our discernment, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think it's time to get to some audience questions. Thanks everybody who's submitted so far, and keep them coming in. Um, there's a question here from Amber who says, "Thank you for this talk. What are some ways that those of us in the West can ensure we do not appropriate this knowledge and practices while still learning from them?"
That's a good question. I would say one is seeking out studying with a good teacher. And I think that's where it starts, when there is that commitment and seeking out a good structured way of progressing into the self-awareness work.
I can vouch for that.
Commitment. I would say commitment is the key, because you might find a good teacher, but everything in life takes over, right? So I'm not saying, oh, every day, 8 hours you need to do practice. I've done that because, I was younger and a little bit more, that was what I was dedicated to. But even if once a week you can dedicate a few hours and slowly build on that, but having it consistent, not saying, oh, I'll do a teacher training for 1 month and then I'm a teacher and that's it. No, to have that consistent commitment is very, very important, and to see that the effects are cumulative.
What about, I just want to ask about, I know for myself, learning to have the humility to keep asking questions, to keep investigating my own preconceptions, and to be willing to listen. How important is that? That's pretty important too, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, you said it right, Ross. You need to have that humility. I mean, if I didn't have that, my teacher wouldn't have accepted me, So first of all, in the acceptance level, I mean, here it's a different format where I teach, where everybody's welcome. I do feel that I need to keep the doors open, especially for the community classes on Saturdays. I feel the doors need to be open for everybody because it's such a, lighter yet deep session. Whereas my teachers never took anybody who knocked on their doors. They said there needs to be a certain baseline adhikaran, which means if you don't have the baseline, it's like, I mean, I'm giving a rough example, but like the military, you need to have a height, weight, basic, and a big part of that was the humility to come and listen to the teacher, the capacity to have enough stillness to listen. Otherwise, if the mind is full of their own ideas and preconceived notions and asking questions just for the sake of asking questions, to interrupt the class or to seek attention, that also my teachers never encouraged. Yeah.
There's a question. Yeah. There's a question from Maury. Maury says, what is a healthy approach to sexuality in authentic Tantra?
Is it Maury or Maury? Yeah, you're right.
Maury.
What is a healthy approach to sexuality in authentic Tantra? So again, not going to either extreme. When we're repressed, when there's guilt, I would say the Victorian, guilt-ridden idea of sexuality is not obviously what we're subscribing to. There's an openness. So I grew up, because of my grandfather, thankfully, talking about these subjects really openly. And it was not typical of an Indian household. It was not typical of many friends I knew. And that was very, very useful in me navigating as a teenager, as an adult, accepting myself where I'm at and not giving it a different name. For example, sometimes my grandfather would say, I want you to sit and understand the difference between love and lust. This was at a really young age. But I find that, interestingly, some of the clients I have, even much later, they're not able to differentiate. Is it attachment? Is it true love? Is it reciprocal love? Is it an elevated love? That discernment, which comes from being completely aware of your energetics, which is, how are your chakras functioning? Do I have a tear in my Swadhisthana chakra? So the sacral, as you call it in the West, or the navel chakra, I prefer to call it the navel chakra, which is the umbilical cord, is called the Swadhisthana chakra. The energetic. So the energy of it is here, but the physical representation is in the navel. So this chakra is called the Swadhisthana chakra. Swa, self, Adi, origin, Sthanam, place. So this is my original place of belonging. Now, if we don't have a strong sense of self, then we're looking to attach ourselves to different spouses or romantic partners simply because it gives us a sense of belonging. And of course, God forbid, the person is a manipulative, not great person, then we've already attached ourselves, and therefore we're not only being pulled in a wrong direction, but we're also absorbing a lot of the imbalances that that person holds because of the sexual interaction. So one is being aware of all the pitfalls. So it's like you would tell your teenage daughter, like, choose who you go out with and don't, indiscriminately, not because you're a prude, not because, oh, it's bad, not because of guilt, but because, again, you're being cautious and understanding that there are a lot of these pitfalls. The second is, how do we approach it in a healthy way? Now, again, there's a entire system in Tantra for the approach to healthy sexuality, which is the self-work I'm talking about. But again, if we were to look at it in a nutshell for this webinar, we'd say from a space of rootedness, from a space of being so connected to the earth that when you connect with another person, it is from that very rooted and expanded space that you're connecting with this other person. And so that you can uplift each other, not just physically, but energetically and on a cosmic level as well. So these are all words. But like I said, only when we do the practice, we can actually engage on healthy levels, because there are so many nuances that rise to the surface as we connect with another energetic being. It could be their past trauma, which is, kind of raked up to the surface just by the power and strength of the connection. That's why we say the sexual connection, the sensual connection, this romantic connection is so powerful, because all our karmas, which means our unconscious traumas and unconscious predispositions, may come to the surface through the energy of two people two polarities coming together. So one has to be really aware of all of that, be able to hold a safe space for oneself and for another in that interaction. And this is the foundation laid before we actually engage with another person. This creating a safe space for self, so that same safe space can be created for another. And when the other cannot create it for you, then oh, this doesn't feel right. And to be able to step back and respect oneself. That's also important, to have that boundary. So it's a very basic level, which I've spoken about. But of course, there's a lot more practices that can give absolute expansion in union.
Thanks for that question, Maury. We have time for one more question from the audience. This one is from Melanie, who says, any ideas or tips if we wish to read further on Tantra and see if this is something we'd like to learn and see if it's what suits us well, a book or website, such as reading on the basic Tantra principles?
That's a good question. I never grew up with reading, and that's the difference, I think, with the Eastern sciences and the Western approach. We're very left brain and say, oh, if I read about it enough, then I might have an idea whether I want to get into this subject or not. And Tantra is not from here. It's from here, and it's from the body. So I would say sit with it, pick up any book on Tantra. I would say I'm not the right person to be recommending books, because that was not my path. My path was a very embodied, heart-centered practice, studying with a teacher, as is traditionally done. So if you do want to read, maybe I'll ask Ross. He's a better person. He reads a lot more than me. He can recommend some books. And there's also a blog on the Arkaya website about Tantra. So that's for free. A lot of resources are there for free, which are a couple of articles on Tantra. So you could read that, which is, I would say, a little bit of a foundation. But I would say more than reading, try a few practices and then see how it feels in your body and take a decision from there, not just from here.
I don't actually have any book recommendations on Tantra either.
Okay.
Yeah, because I've been studying with you in that more, the same way that you studied. So I haven't gone and sought out books on Tantra. So sorry about that, Melanie. But I mean, Banyen has tons of books if you want to check it out. They do have a Tantra section. But yeah, you just need to be careful about whose book it is a little bit and just kind of check who that author is. Maitreyi, before we go, I wanted to just ask you, you're doing a retreat at Hollyhock, June 14th to 19th, Cortez Island. It's called Finding Fulfillment Through Tantra, Magnetize Your Heart's Desire. And I just wanted to ask you before we go, how would you define fulfillment through the Tantric lens?
So the fulfillment comes from the integration of all our dimensions and living them in real time in the body. So how does it look like is your question. So many of us, interestingly, think fulfillment comes from some idea that has been sold to us. And most of us are conditioned to believe, oh, if I'm just giving examples that many people can relate to. I have this big house, I'm going to be fulfilled. I have this great partner, I'm going to be fulfilled. I have the picket fenced house with the kids, with the dog, with the cat, then I'm going to be fulfilled. So here, the reverse is happening. You're working on layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of all these samskaras that are sitting in our system, harmonizing it. So when this harmonizing happens, when on a practical level, when a physical body is harmonized with the emotional body, is harmonized with the energetic body, is harmonized with the mental body, which is harmonized with the cosmic body, then true fulfillment happens. Now that's the surface level. Now there are deeper levels, when there are deeper layers and layers and layers of the mind. All those layers also need to be harmonized. Again, if you look at the energy body, there are many, many, many layers of energy, the surface level energy, the deeper energy pathways, all of them being harmonized. So we have deeper and deeper and deeper levels of fulfillment that can be attained by working on the self. So yeah, in a nutshell, but there's somewhere we can start. And these are all very light practices that I enjoy doing myself. And as you know, in the community, it's all people who are regular, non-flamboyant people, if I were to put it like that, who just love the simple life and love, smelling the roses and laughing and finding humor in the small things in life and finding the mystic in the mundane. So if I were to point to something about Tantra, that's what happens. Even the most mundane things become magical with a CK, magic, rather than the false fantasy and magic that I spoke of in the beginning, where we're, juxtaposing all this fantasy onto the spiritual life. That's very different from actually becoming subtle and sensitive and finding magic in the beauty and subtlety of life.
Maitreyi, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. Again, everybody, this is my teacher, and a deep bow to you, my pranams. I've learned and gained so much knowledge and been given so much support and love by this woman here with us tonight. So big thank you. And her website is arkaya.net. If you want to learn more, all the different programs, including her Saturday morning online satsang, is there. And wishing everyone a beautiful evening. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you, my Tambi. I call Ross my little brother. So, that's the affection and love I hold for him in my heart. So thank you for inviting me, and lovely to be here. And yeah, It's just like having a sweet family conversation. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for Branches of Wisdom, a podcast of Banyen Books and Sound, Canada's spiritual and healing resource since 1970. Our podcast producer is Jacob Steele. The show is edited by Abdo Habani. Watch all our conversations on YouTube by searching for Banyen Books, or listen on your favorite podcast platform. Please subscribe, follow, like, and leave your reviews and comments. We love to hear from you. For all our live events, books, and more, visit us at banyen.com.